So I'm Kent Lehnhof. I'm an associate professor of English, and I specialize in Shakespeare and early modern culture. And I do not have the experience of Professor Braddock, but I hope to make up for it in enthusiasm. So I'm gonna spend about 10 or 15 minutes just talking in general about the historical and thematic elements of the play, and then we'll give way to a more specific discussion about this production. So in 1603, Queen Elizabeth I fell sick and died, ending the 45-year reign of England's Virgin Queen. And as you might expect of a Virgin Queen, she did not leave any children to take up the throne when she died, and so England was forced to import, if you will, a king from Scotland. So they bring down King James VI of Scotland, and he becomes King James I of England. And about 3 or 4 years later, Shakespeare's acting company first presents Macbeth, which means that the tragedy that's commonly known as the Scottish play is written for a Scottish king, a man who spoke with a very thick Scottish accent and was very much seen as an outsider by the English commoners. This Scottish king, moreover, had just asserted his authority over Shakespeare's acting company. Prior to 1603, Shakespeare's company had been patronized by the Lord Chamberlain. They were known as the Lord Chamberlain's men. But within a few months of acceding to the throne, King James had sort of taken and laid claim on them and rechristened them the King's Men. And in some ways, Macbeth seems like just the kind of play a bunch of King's Men would want to perform for their new royal patron. For one, the play includes a Scottish thane named Banquo, who just happens to be one of James's direct ancestors. The historical records that Shakespeare had available to him indicate that Banquo conspired with Macbeth to kill King Duncan. Of course, Shakespeare sort of ignores that fact in his staging and distances Banquo from the regicide. So in Shakespeare's play, Banquo is merely a good man who falls prey to Macbeth's murderous suspicions. So Macbeth gives us a cleaned up version of King James's ancestry. It also presents a rather flattering image of King James's rule. There's one point in the play when 3 prophetic speakers point to a long line of august kings that conveniently culminates in the reign of King James I. And what king wouldn't want to see himself as the fulfillment of a centuries-old prophecy? So we clean up the family tree, and we offer up King James as the best fruit of that family tree. And then there's the bit about witchcraft. Shakespeare's play famously begins with 3 weird sisters who cast spells, commit mischief, and utter dire prophecies. King James, of course, was a self-proclaimed witch hunter. Not only was he convinced that witches were real, but he was also convinced that they were trying to kill him personally. As King of Scotland, he actively participated in witchcraft trials, often examining the accused and drawing conclusions as an expert witness. And in 1597, he publishes a large and learned treatise called Demonology that details all of the sort of ins and outs of witches. And in 1604, soon after he accedes to the English throne, he strengthens the English laws against witchcraft and sorcery. But if the weird sisters of Macbeth play into James's interest or dread of witchcraft, they do so only obliquely, because the word witch isn't used in reference to them. The sisters in Shakespeare's text are termed wayard or wayward, which in early modern English can convey a wide range of meanings. It might mean the power to control the fate or destiny of human beings, but it might also mean nothing more than odd or strange looking. So there's a bunch of wiggle room there. And a lot depends on the performance. So as you watch the staging of the weird sisters in this production, one thing you'll want to ask yourself is, what kind of weird are they? Are they supernatural agents who determine the course of events in the manner of Greek fates? Or are they just strange-looking women whose riddling words are all the excuse Macbeth needs to start carving up sleeping kings, to say nothing of women and children? One thing's for sure, it doesn't take much to turn Macbeth to evil. Macbeth has no sooner arrived on stage than he's plotting unthinkable deeds. And he'll tap the brakes a couple of times, but the overwhelming course of this play is Macbeth careening downhill into hell. For 4 full acts, our tragic protagonist is a butcher, pure and simple, wading in blood up to his knees and resolved to continue slogging through, regardless of the outcome. And this really sets Macbeth apart from the great tragedies that immediately precede it. Unlike Hamlet, Othello, and Lear, Macbeth does not tell the story of a man who is slowly and gradually undone. Macbeth doesn't have the sensitivity of a Hamlet, or the nobility of an Othello, or the majesty of a Lear. He's savage from the start. The first time we hear tell of Macbeth, he's cleaving MacDonald from the nave to the chops, and then fixing his decapitated head upon the battlements for all to see. Nor is Macbeth's descent into evil gradual or slow. He's plunging his dagger into the anointed king at the end of Act 1. It therefore can come as no surprise that Macbeth is a very dark play. Most of the action takes place at night, and even daytime doesn't fully mitigate the darkness. After the murder of King Duncan, the sun refuses to shine, and the Scots stumble around in a day without light. Yet, even in the midst of all this darkness, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth call for even more darkness. Here's Macbeth. "Stars, hide your fires. Let not light see my black and deep desires. The eye wink at the hand." And Lady Macbeth says, "Come, thick night, and pall thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife sees not the wound that it makes." But besides the darkness of night, which sort of pervades this play, there's one other color on stage, the redness of blood. Lady Macbeth is amazed at the amount of blood that pours from King Duncan's wounds. Who would have thought the old man to have had so much blood in him? She marvels. And once Duncan's blood is shed, there's a veritable flood. In Act 3, Macbeth says, "I am in blood stepped so far that should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as going o'er." At another point, he contemplates his stained hands and says, "Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? No. This my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red." For many, Macbeth sums up the meaning of the play when he dully remarks, "It will have blood, they say. Blood will have blood." So in this play, Shakespeare chooses to paint with only two colors, blood red and night black. Yet the picture he creates is hauntingly beautiful. From a poetic point of view, this play is gorgeous. Think of that line when Macbeth laments that his bloody hand will the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red. Could there be a more perfect bit of poetry? But could there be a more appalling content? And for me, this is the endless fascination of this play. In Macbeth, Shakespeare uses his considerable genius to express the abhorrent beauty of absolute evil. But the play doesn't stop here. If it did, it would perhaps be sort of morally monstrous. It's true that Lady Macbeth and Macbeth are never more alive than when they contemplate killing the king. They thrill with vitality and excitement. But as soon as they commit the act, they're oppressed with the banality of evil. And I'm not just talking about guilt. To be sure, they are both tormented by guilt, but even more afflicting than Macbeth's guilt is his ennui. His awesome will to power, magnificently manifested in Duncan's murder, gives way to an all-consuming listlessness. He'll murder many more times, but each time it becomes more mechanical, more tiresome, more wearisome. What really wears on Macbeth is the tedium of evil. In his wickedness, he cannot find contentment or joy or even desire. There's nothing but this, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, creeping at its petty pace to the last syllable of recorded time. And perhaps this is the ultimate truth of the tragedy. When decency and goodwill give way to wickedness and evil, life loses its meaning. It can be no more than a tiresome monotony, a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Thanks.